Welcome. I'm happy to be here, and I'm very happy about the interest in this topic, because what we're talking about here, that's cutting edge, that's happening right now, and right now they have the opportunity to take back spaces for creation, for action, that we can check out now. What did we learn from the usage of technology up until now, and how do we want to continue in the future? That's what it's about today, the good effects, the negative effects, and how the human can become not raw material for technology. Where is this term from? Parasozialität is a term coined for the relationship between fans and movie stars or bands. Nowadays, that has changed fundamentally. We saw the band, we traveled around, went to meetups, and had a fan culture. Nowadays, the stars are on the internet and social media. They have channels where you can get into contact with them, or you seemingly get into contact with them. But we also have new phenomena like internet celebrities, and most of us probably follow some influencers, or on the micro level, the mechanisms work just as well. In the micro or meso level of influencership and follow people online. And that's a significant difference. We continuously get updates in the seemingly private about the lives of others, and we feel like we're following them, and those updates are in our private lives. The cell phone is 1.5 meters away from us. If it's further away than that, you get nervous normally. Reflect on it. Does that happen to you too? 1.5 meters, that's the distance we can usually live with well before getting nervous. Parasozialität, that's an umbrella term for different phases of the phenomenon. Not all those channels work the same way, but they have similar mechanisms. And under certain circumstances, you can put them all together. Messengers, some of which you might use some of them or all of them. Online dating, a lot of us do that. Social media, and when you're getting intimate, also OnlyFans, where you can get your answer through monetary means. You pay, and then you can be sure to get an answer. And then we also have relationships we lead with artificial intelligence. Chatbots help us to work. We have sex with them. We might fall in love with chatbots. That also works. Why does that work? Our brain doesn't have an evolutionary boundary and says, oh, now we're looking at a digital reality. So that means we know that it's not a mutual relationship. We know that we cannot expect an answer if you send a message to an influencer. But the social self still continues the same mechanisms, how we're psychologically organized towards those relationships. There is no filter in our head that says, oh, careful, now it's getting digital. And we're studying this. We have a lot of methods how we study this. But amongst other things, we look at microprocesses. How does everyday life work? What do these things mean that we do online? And I hope I brought a few examples. All of those are real. Maybe you can see yourselves or your friends, families, colleagues in those. So you're having sex, and when you're done, you go over to the side and you scroll through TikTok. You don't cuddle, you don't look into each other's eyes. That was nice, but now we roll over and scroll, and everyone is deeply immersed in their own world. Oh, my social battery is depleted. I'm too tired to meet with lots of other people on Saturday. I'd rather go on to social media. I get a bit of inspiration. That's how it feels. Or you're in a relationship. You have a fight, and then everyone goes into the room, and then we continue this via WhatsApp. Feels a bit more safe, more distance. We're writing each other, using emojis, reflect upon messages. At least you have some sort of slowing down in the relationship. After work, you might have the feeling that the way to come down is to scroll through the internet. We're soothing ourselves. That's a very important function. We're soothing ourselves via using those things. It might start softly. It might not mean much. You're buying women's sportswear. I'm guilty of that as well. But it doesn't end there. Some of us buy the car that's been advertised, for instance. Those are real examples. In our practice, someone bought a car that an influencer from LA advertised for, which led to mold on the roof in our Schleswig-Holstein. But she didn't criticize the parasocial relationship following this. She criticized herself. She felt guilty, said, why was I so stupid doing this? She couldn't explain it to herself. Why didn't I think that through? It's obvious that it works better for her than it would for me. During the pandemic, we saw people trust their influencers more than friends and family when it's about political stances, about opinion. And you have the feeling they're there for me. They have a constant narrative, and you might have noticed when influencers change their narrative, that might be annoying for people. We might unfollow them. We might even take the time to write a message saying, I am going to unfollow now. Your narrative is terrible. Another fitness influencer lost to the baby narrative. It's a pretty harsh tone. And that's really interesting. Why are we doing this? Why do we take the step to unfollow, even though we know it doesn't mean anything, but it does mean something? It was a relationship for us, and we end it. We break up. And why do we know this? The brutal reality of social media is known to us because influencers post this. And then they say, you're so pathetic that you message me about this. And that's also part of it. For a long time, we in research operationalized the usage of cell phones as FOMO, that you're afraid to miss out on something, or as addiction. There was a long discourse on, is it addiction or is it similar to addiction? I'm of the team, it's similar to addiction. If you throw it into the river in Berlin today, nothing happens to you. If you throw your cell phone into the river, nothing happens to you. It's similar to addiction. It's a strong habit, but if you put it away, nothing worse happens than that you're bored, are afraid of your feelings, but then you will start getting creative again. The feelings, I don't mean it's simple, but the feelings seem way worse than they actually are. So those relationships are meaningful to us because they are relationships. We don't have a filter that says, just because it's digital, just because it's one-sided, I won't work within the same mechanisms of a relationship. For instance, that I don't relate to this person, that I have processes related to my identity, and that I have connection. We only have a limited number of strong connections. If you follow 4 influencers and look at 30, 40 story updates a day, that's not much. And those might be your main relations. And that is competitive to face-to-face relations. We only have the time that we have. And if we choose to spend it on story updates of influencers, and if we choose to invest emotion there, invest our time there, and also invest money there, then we cannot do that in other places. And then those are our relations. But that carries certain problems. Because If you are in a crisis because you're getting divorced, you cannot crash on the couch of your favorite influencer. It's one-sided. And there are always the questions, what about the positive effects? I want to criticize it harshly, and I think I can do that because I also measured positive effects. It's also my fault. So you can measure positive effects of parasociality quite well. You can measure online dating works. You can measure social media usage decreases the feeling of loneliness and isolation. How does that work? Well, that's a problem of how we do research. We do fragmented research, usually. If we look without a meta-theoretical framework, that's actually the case. Social media does decrease loneliness. You can measure that my grandmother, who's in a home, who gets images via social media from her grandchildren, she will, of course, feel that her loneliness decreases, given the fact that if she wouldn't have that, she would be totally lonely. Not in a situation where she would live in a multi-generational household and would bathe her grandchildren in the afternoon. We need a framework of meta-theory and contextualize why can we measure that? Well, we can measure it because the alternative would be so much worse in our neoliberal reality. We can measure that online dating is highly functional. Around half of the couples who met in the last few years are online dating couples. That has been normalized completely. The stigma is very low nowadays. And then you ask people, what would you prefer? Well, offline, or at least Instagram. That's a lot more romantic. And why don't you do it? Well, I have the feeling that the public sphere is closed. I don't feel safe walking up to people and talking to them. I feel like I risk too much. And, well, I don't dare. And the other side also exists. Not only the walking up to talking to people, but also the ones that make it possible. We don't send many signals that make it possible. Smile, look at people for a long time, show your hands. We don't make ourselves approachable much. And now, you can say that sounds problematic. It is. What we can also measure is, for instance, that the parasocial, for instance, strong usage of online platforms or a lot of time spent on social media, that has strong negative effects on self-esteem, experiencing fear and anxiety. It correlates strongly with eating disorders, with depression, hope for the future. Those are the layers of subjectivity of the single individual, but we also have effects on the societal level. We have parasocial relationships, and we are training to accept how the social works. What do we train? Amongst other things, that ghosting is okay. We don't ghost only during online dating, but also our therapist, craftspeople, friendships, the grandma. We ghost all sorts of relationships. And we also accept that social relations can be one-sided. When we follow influencers, it's one-sided. We might accept that a business case can be behind relations, that relations belong to an economic systems where we pay by being online, by looking there, by create clicks. We buy things by investing money, and that we get something back. It's more at OnlyFans. There we pay for a chat answer or to see something. Those are societal influences, and they go far, far beyond the online platform. What we train there are traditions that write themselves into the basics of societal structure. I get asked, you're talking about online dating, but not everybody does this. No, not everybody does it, but the traditions that we establish through that are writing themselves into our society. That we ghost each other, that we think that we should do parallel dating, that we have a relationship on the background of having a lot of attractive alternatives that are easily reachable and that we can externalize needs with low thresholds. If your partner doesn't validate you, you can get a compliment easily through online sources. And then when we look at that, it can happen that the human becomes the raw material for technology. It means the value of a person depends on how much time he or she is online.
So we are being used up by technology for the economic purpose instead of utilizing technology in order to live or to lead our lives. This is obviously a problem because it doesn't have a positive spillover effect. If you go to a festival and you're very unsuccessful, you don't even get sex, let me say, and you definitely don't get a relationship. You still heard music, you still ate festival food, you looked at a sunset, where are you going? For example, you're going out in the countryside somewhere, usually that's where the festivals are, and if instead you spent your weekend online, you did none of that, you were only online, you may have, you didn't lead any nice in-person discussions, you didn't tell stories to someone else, you were only online, and for most people that doesn't feel like it gives you good quality of life. You don't have any stories you can tell later on about how you try to chase after a person or something. So those are all real stories, as I said before. So how could this happen that you sort of forget about living your life? You may have that feeling that you go into town and you're dressed up nicely and you're going for a jog, and you usually get some kind of reaction out of passerbys. Maybe they just look at you. For example, I take the train a lot, and you usually look down onto your phone, for example, and there's a lot of apocalyptic memes about this, about how everybody has this doom stare into their phone, and as a tendency, this happens, and people are getting more critical. They think about, is this what I really want? But there's no measurable change in behavior that I can observe. There are kids that say, Dad loves me, but he loves the phone more, and kids usually construct their world very radically. Whatever they see, that is their reality, and if, for example, they start crying and you don't run to them and say you're the most important person to me, then they usually think that the phone is more important. And this is not about shame or guilt. We don't try to shame anyone. This is a lot of social pressure around that, especially in a problem with our work life at the moment, that there's not a lot of room for being a parent, for example. But it's a problem. And let's say a whole group of young people are going to Budapest and they all hang out on Tinder all the time. They still have a problem. You may also have a lot of parasocial behavior when dating. For example, you're at a date, your phone may be on the table, under the table, you're still swiping, it's still ringing. Even when you have the phone on the table, the person you're with has a lot of negative emotions. It's the constant possibility that something might be more important on the phone than the person you're with. So if you're opening your heart and letting them close to you, and then they get distracted by something on the phone, then you get jealous. And what do? What was more important than me right now? Even so, in a way, it's actually true. If your partner says it's not more important than you, that is somewhat true on a certain level, but it's also only part of the answer. And so, for example, if someone says, look, I found something really funny, this is like a really cool meme, I encourage you to share it with your partner, because that at least gives you a little bit of contact, and it's better than the alternative. But you don't just argue with people when you have this kind of behavior. You also don't do enough sport. You run out of time to do important things. If you have a lot of screen time, you will see that maybe you were 2, 4, 6 hours online, but you then run out of time for other things, and it shows the priorities. So this we are allowed to learn that this it doesn't only have negative effects. It's all right. For example, you have your loved one is on the other side of the world. For example, in Australia, and you're both using sex robots. Then, for example, you're using technology and you're not interacting in person, but it helps you build a connection with your significant other that you otherwise wouldn't have. So that's good. But there's also critique. And, for example, the answer often is, what do we do with this consumption of technology? And the answer we usually give is limit the time we spend with it. For example, in school we say, okay, no phones allowed, or something at work, and I believe that is wrong. There is still a lot of effect, even if we're just online for half an hour, because no matter how many inspirational quotes we're seeing that you shouldn't compare yourself with others, that's what you usually do. You compare your body to your fitness influencer that you're following, or to that model, or whoever. Or you buy whatever your influencer is telling you to, or... This behavior also happens in the context where people have the media competency. So, for example, if you have an argument in your family with your kids, for example, they don't want to go to bed, what do? Some people solve it in that they say they don't want to limit the media time that their kids have, because otherwise they would argue when they are not allowed anymore. And for parents, it's worse, because they're in a constant limbo, Sometimes they just delete their phone, sometimes they try to limit themselves to an hour, 1 or 2 a day, and it's a constant struggle. You keep going back and forth. But the time limit really is somewhat of a futile effort. What I would suggest instead is, I hope you have a lot of interest in us coming out of the lab and suggest something. What we need is a parasocial competency. We have it about 1.5 meters away from us, the phone. We don't need to bewitch the technology or declare it taboo. We need to differentiate between what is good and what is bad, and we shouldn't despair about it. But what we need for that are narratives. We need to acknowledge that this relationship you have with the phone is important. Are you asking your colleague or your friend or whoever you're here with if your relationship with your phone is great? That's not something we ask. We're not asking, is your favorite influencer, did they block you? Is that bad? How do you feel about that? This is not accepted behavior at the moment, but really it should be. Okay, the technology disagrees with me. I get it. And we also need to have room for this in the education. There is nothing regarding parasociality and related behaviors in university. How many of you are highly competent about teaching effective and safe online dating? We're still working out the details and how that could work. It's not as simple as saying it's okay if you do it for 30 minutes a day, and then that's fine. In the Scandinavia, they're sort of doing a rollback. They're selling all the laptops and the iPads, and they're going back to books. But that's also not the easy answer. We need the competency. What you're saying is put down the iPad, and are we then actually setting a positive example? Are you then telling your kid not just put down the iPhone, but rather go out and for example, ride a bike or something? So it's not enough to say this is not how you should do it. We should tell them how to do it. And it's also very important if you're talking to someone at the end of their life, they're usually telling you that they're sad about the times that they've missed. So it's better to go to a festival and fail at finding a partner rather than not going. So take chances. And we also need therapy. That's obviously my field of expertise. That's why it's very close to my heart. But we need to have therapists think about this kind of behavior to be knowledgeable about it. Are we in a mode where we live in a way that we can use technology? We should, for example, utilize it for finding someone who wants to go with us to a concert because we have a spare ticket for if you have that. It's also great if you get a great vegan recipe for your grandma, for example. That is completely fine. It's also fine if you program your own music. You're utilizing technology to extend yourself. It is a chance. I was so positive, and then technology still fails me. There is a chance there. You can extend yourself, and you can utilize it. It's fine to spend hours and hours on it. That is great. But you need to make the distinction. Am I being consumed, or I'm living a very fulfilled life where I'm utilizing technology? And this is what I'm inviting you to take part in, put the focus on. For example, what should we let go? So forget about fapping, but instead stroke your significant other after sex. It sounds easy, but we're obviously, none of us are idiots. We all knew that none of this is real that we're seeing online, but it feels real, and we're imposing the needs we have regarding to the relationships onto that medium, and in a reflexive mediatization where we're looking on the effects that media have on the human and vice versa. We're taking decision every day. Are we going out into the woods, or are we doing a dinner, or are we putting our phone under the pillow? There is still a dynamic that is being established. So I have a few tools that are great for the educational practice. How can dating work in online dating? For example, there is a license, a driver's license kind of thing for porn and for dating that teaches you how to do these things. It sounds fun, but it's real. And we, as psychologists and psychotherapists, have evidence that these kind of approaches can work. And unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions, but I'm at the stand over there. There's a booth where I'm selling books. And if you have questions, please feel free to walk up to me and ask me. And I'm available. I'm happy to talk to you about this topic. Thank you.